The carefree days of middle school. Not knowing anything but thinking like you knew everything. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's relive those memories of the prepubescent and the horror stories that could have happened. Middle school security alert. I only just recently started reading the subreddit, almost non-stop, but recently nonetheless. I finally decided to share one of my own stories that, still to this day, really bothers me. Mind you, I'm a female, currently 22, and the beginning of this story is in the 7th and 8th grade for middle school. In middle school, we had a campus security guard named Mr. Cole. He was a pudgy white guy, somewhere in his 30s, not much hair. From what I remember, he was pretty social with most of the kids, just really friendly, joked around with us, etc. I was one of the kids who would talk to him often because he was just a really cool guy. He always seemed a little off though. But since I was a social reject with not many friends, I figured I probably seemed off too. I would lightly one-arm hug any of the teachers or staff I felt comfortable with. I assume now because they were the only ones that made me feel accepted. This most likely made me a bit naive. He would usually try to bear hug me. Looking back on this, it was creepy. At the time, it was whatever. But I would do my awkward half one-arm hug and scurry away. Fast forward. I am a sophomore in high school now, and someone I've kept in contact with once in a blue moon since elementary school emails me a news article. Mr. Cole had changed careers since I'd left middle school. He had become the junior varsity girls basketball team coach of some school about 20 or 30 minutes away. Unfortunately, the article wasn't about him changing jobs. He was being arrested because he was having sexual relations with a few of his 14 to 15-year-old students on the team. Only one of them had given consent. Though being a minor, it was still considered rape because minors cannot legally give consent to sex. This creeps me out terribly because he was our security guard. At middle school age, this is someone who you trust to keep you safe. When I read the article, I felt sick and horrified that I had conversations with him. I'd hugged this man. Mr. Cole, though I'm much older now, let's not meet again. Abducted by a school bus driver. This encounter happened to my mom when she was in middle school in the early 70s. Her family lived outside of town, so she rode the bus to and from school. She was in 6th grade and had a boyfriend who also rode her bus. They would sit together and hold hands, but they were never inappropriate with their interactions. The bus driver took notice of their relationship and started to make comments to them. He asked if they kissed a lot, if they tongued, and once even asked him if he'd sniffed her underwear. Not knowing what to do, they just did their best to ignore him. On the last day of school, the bus route went as usual, except that the driver skipped my mom's stop. When he stopped at the next house, several miles away, she tried to get off of the bus with that girl. The kids all knew each other pretty well and were friends. The driver stopped her and made her go sit back down. Every stop after that, she tried to get off the bus, but he'd tell her to go sit back down until she was the last one left on the bus. She was already terrified and crying. She said that she didn't remember if she was praying out loud or not, but she remembers just begging for an idea of how to get away. The driver told her to move to the front of the bus behind his seat. Instead, She picked up her things and moved to the very last seat. On her way, she set her books and things in the middle of the aisle, hoping that if he came after her, he would be slowed down. He finally started back down her road towards her house, but turned off onto a dirt road, leading back to some bushes. She finally decided that if he even slowed down enough, she was going out the back emergency door and running for it. As he turned onto another dirt road deeper into the bushes, she happened to glance out the back window to see her dad and her older brother in their truck following behind. She shouted up to the driver, "You better stop this bus right now! That's my dad behind the bus!" He stopped the bus and opened the doors for her to get off, but she was too scared to move. Within a few seconds, her dad was on the bus, standing right up next to the driver so that she could walk around behind him. He told her to go get in the truck with her brother. As she sat in the truck, she could see her dad through the back window of the bus, just going off on this guy. Verbally, unfortunately. When her dad got back into the truck, he hugged her like never before, and she just lost it, crying. She knew that if her dad wasn't there, she might not have escaped with her life. Now, this wasn't just a coincidence that her dad had found her. Every kid who got off the bus after they missed my mom's stop had gone home and told their parents that the driver would not let her off the bus and that she was really scared and crying. The parents all called my grandparents to let them know that the stories they were getting. My grandparents never reported the incidents to the police or the school, but they did talk to the owner of the bus company, and they never saw that guy driving again. My mom believes that they didn't report it to the police because her dad had threatened the driver's life, and he would in turn report that to the police. My grandfather went to his grave without ever revealing what he said to that bus driver. Several years later, my mom was talking with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law said that her cousin, who was married to a guy from my mom's hometown, she was telling her that this guy was in prison for impregnating his 14-year-old stepdaughter. As an off-the-cuff remark, she mentions that he used to drive a school bus in the district where my mom went to school. My mom almost passed out at this news. She asked his name and was given the name of the bus driver who abducted her all those years ago. I know, I feel the same way that they should have said something to the police and had him arrested long before he could possibly harm another potential victim. I believe they made a mistake in that regard. But still, I'm glad that perv ended up in prison, though. Internet creeper shows up at our middle school. This story takes place when I was about 12 to 13, around 2005 to 2006, when MSN was really big. I met a girl in my grade who hung around my group of friends, but I'd only just met her. I'm going to call her Alice. She was very overweight, who got picked on a lot and apparently didn't have the best home life. So I tried to be nice to her, even though she gave off a few red flags of not being the most stable person. So, anyways, here is my story. It was a Friday after school, and I was waiting for my bus to go to my dad's house for the weekend. My bus was one of the last to leave, and Alice comes up and starts talking to me, and asked if I wanted to hang out with her at her grandparents' house. I told her I was going to my dad's, and my dad, myself, and my younger siblings were supposed to go see a movie that night. She's really insistent, and I eventually say I have to check in with Dad. I call him from the office, and he surprisingly says yes, and tells me to be at Alice's at around 7:30, and to pick me up then for the movie. We walk around town a little bit, and then go to her house, and immediately she goes to her laptop and signs into MSN with me sitting next to her. I ask her who some people on the list are, because I recognize next to none of the people on it. She tells me she has a lot of friends online, which at the time I thought was super weird. Instantly, a bunch of people start messaging her, and in particular one guy I would just call James. I don't remember his real name. His personal message script says something like, "I love my sexy babe Alice," and I get even more weirded out. She says this guy is her boyfriend, who is like 16, but she hasn't met him, but apparently lives just a few hours away. She tells him she is hanging out with a friend, and he says something like, "Oh, turn on your webcam, I want to see if I know her." I am uncomfortable with it, but I didn't know her well enough to protest, so she turns it on. But he doesn't turn on his. He starts getting creepy. He starts saying things like, "Oh, your friend is as hot as you," and telling me I look hot and should really take off my sweater. He makes weird passes like that we should make out and stuff like that, and innuendos about a threesome, which I didn't really understand at the time. I ask why he doesn't turn on his webcam, and she says it's because he doesn't have one, and I start getting even more suspicious. I tell her I want to get off the computer and go hang out outside and play with her rabbit, and she tells him we have to go, and he starts getting really pissed off at her and is obviously manipulating her to stay inside. I think he's a fucking creep, so I go outside alone and pet her rabbit in its little enclosure, and she eventually comes outside. She tells me they got into a fight, but made up, and he's finally coming to visit her next Friday and wants us all to hang out, even though I never directly spoke to him, and she isn't a good friend. So many red flags. I brushed it off, and we have an uneventful evening until my dad comes up and picks me up. Sunday, when I get back to my mom's place, I go on MSN, and I have a friend request from someone I don't know. I assume it's a friend from school. The email seemed very middle school, so I added it. As soon as I do, a window opens and says something like, "Hey, sexy girl." I ask who it is, and sure enough, it's James. I say I have to go and just block him. Monday at school, Alice is talking to me at lunch and says he really liked me, and he was coming Friday for sure, and asked if we were still on for all hanging out. I make up some excuse about having to go to my dad's again, and she drops it. I believe it was the following Friday. Our school went into a lockdown. Basically, they lock everyone in their classrooms, and we turn off the lights and can't leave until it comes over the PA that it's all clear. Everyone assumes it's a drill, and we work quietly at our desk and talk. The lockdown lasts most of the period before it's over. In between the next class, a vice principal grabs me outside of class and tells me to come with him to the office. I follow him, and he doesn't talk until we get there, where the guidance counselor is sitting there with a female cop. I'm like, what the fuck? They just say that they have a few things to ask me, but I can call my parents if I want to. I have no idea what it's all about, and I tell them no. The vice principal asked if I know Alice. I say yes. He asked if I know a guy named James, and I say no, but Alice does. He tells me the guy wasn't really a 16-year-old James, but a 40-year-old man I'll say was Tom or something. I was freaked out as hell, but I told them I just knew he was supposed to meet her after school, and that was all, and they let me go. The cop just kinda sat there and took notes. I didn't know much about it for a while, but I pieced it together eventually through what Alice said about it and other kids who were at the front of the school when he showed up. Apparently, the guy showed up saying he was her uncle and it was an emergency. The receptionist in the office was suspicious and asked for proof as he wasn't on the list of emergency contacts, I think. And of course, he didn't have any. She called the principal out, and the guy was irate, demanding he send her down. He got even more angry and said that I knew who he was and that they can call me. Something to that effect. They refused and asked him to leave. He wouldn't, so they called the cops and locked down the school, and he just went nuts in the office apparently. I am really scared to think what could have happened to that girl. He knew what school she went to, and my best guess is he got impatient to do whatever he wanted to her. I don't think he was charged because he was clearly mentally unstable. Shortly after, I cut ties with Alice because she was into a lot of risky behaviors even after that. So, creepy internet pedophile man, let's not meet.